Hello, everyone. Lovely to see lots of my jail customers online. My name is Smriti and I'm from Bags of Ethics. And we're just waiting for a few more attendees to attend. But I have the huge honor and privilege of introducing a very dear friend to the brand, Tony KIRKHAM, who has such an incredible knowledge and history of everything tree related. So welcome to Plant a Tree for the Jubilee. As we all know, it's Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, and we are going to be celebrating across the next week. But actually, the tree planting season continues or recontinues from October this year. So Tony is going to be giving us some tips on how we can plant a tree for the Jubilee. Bags of Ethics has had an incredible partnership with John Lewis and the Queen's Green Canopy and Waitrose over the past year. So just to give you a little bit of an oversight, the Queen's Green Canopy is Her Majesty's only sustainable collaboration and initiative for the Platinum Jubilee. And it's been Her Majesty's mission and intention to plant as many trees across the United Kingdom as possible. And Tony here has been part of Her Majesty's committee to support choice of trees and where they need to be planted. And we as Bags of Ethics have wanted to raise as much money to get as many trees planted into the ground in urban areas, particularly for communities who are quite disadvantaged, who don't have the benefit of having trees in their local area. And the funds raised will also go towards forestry skills and training skills. So as you can see behind me, we've got a beautiful range of products, all nature inspired and sustainably made in our factory. And we've got a little bit of time later on to talk about the products which are available in all Waitrose shops and John Lewis online and John Lewis stores. So without further ado, I have the great pleasure to introduce Tony, who's going to talk to you about planting trees for the Jubilee.
Thank you, Smriti, and thank you for asking me to do this. It's a great honour, actually, because anything that's linked to the Queen's Green Canopy is something that I want to do, and I will encourage as many people as possible to do as well. One of the other things that we're doing, and this is a Q&A as well, so this is your opportunity to ask me any questions about trees, and if I can answer them, then I will, and if not, then I will get an answer for you. So don't be shy. No one can see you, and don't be never be embarrassed about asking a question, especially about trees. But one of the other good things about the Queen's Green Canopy, I mean, it is an incredible time to celebrate, and what better way of doing it than planting a tree and highlighting trees and highlighting the importance and significance of trees. And one of the other things that we're doing with the Greens Canopy, we've selected through a nomination system 70 trees, individuals, heritage specimen trees with good stories around the British Isles, so in Northern Ireland, in Scotland, Wales and England, and 70 woodlands, so ancient woodlands that again have stories to tell, and we have so much to learn from them. And these are being photographed now by two excellent photographers in the tree world, and we'll be producing a book that will highlight these and show people where they are and encourage people to go and look at them and say hello, because trees do like us saying hello to them. They know we're there. And not only is it good for trees, but it's good for our own mental well-being and mental health as well. And I go around, I talk to trees and make sure they're aware that I'm there. So
Tony, you should tell everyone about the tree that we planted a few weeks ago at the Chelsea Physic Garden.
Yes. Yeah,
that was a very special tree that we planted in the centre of London. When we launched the collection with the British Fashion Council and the editors of British Vogue and various different celebrities. But Tony had a really fun time choosing the tree, and you chose a very poisonous tree, didn't you, for everyone to not touch?
That's right. This was at Chelsea Physic Garden, where I am a trustee, and we were looking for a central location in London to plant a tree and launch Bags of Ethics products and link it to the Queen's Green Canopy. And it's a very small garden, so it's important that you choose the right tree for the right place. And in that case, in the case of Chelsea Physic Garden, it's a garden that highlights medicinal plants and edible plants, plants of importance. And because it's a small garden, it has to tick many boxes. So the more ticks it gets, then the more deserved it is of that space. And I chose a tree called the bead tree. And I hope you don't mind me using some of the Latin names, but Melia azadarac, which I think is a great Latin name for people to learn and rattle off at a dinner party. But it's, every part of it's poisonous. And that's the relevance of it is highlighting that, but also the economic importance of it, because the seeds, excuse me, the fruits, which are round, they're about the size of a 5p piece. And when they're dried, they're very hard, and they're used to make rosary beads, hence the name the bead tree. But it also has many medicinal properties. It's a beautiful tree. It's got a lovely, fine, delicate leaf and a nice flower, a violet blue flower. And it's quite tender, actually. I mean, it grows in the Mediterranean region very well, and into Western Asia. But it's not really hardy in this country. But the Chelsea Physic Gardens is jewel in the crown in London, with an incredible microclimate where this tree will grow well. And I can't wait to see. I went to see it the other day, Smooth Tree, and just said, touch it, make it aware that I was keeping an eye on it, and seeing that it was doing well. And it is coming into leaf, and it's going to be a super addition to the garden. So, but one of the big questions I get asked is, how did you get into trees? I've spent all my working life working with trees, and actually, it was at school that I first became interested in trees, and I had a really good teacher that put me in charge of the nature table, and one day she brought into the classroom one Friday a big vase of horse chestnut twigs with a big sticky buds on. And she said, this is a sign of spring. And any time these branches will come into leaf. And I didn't, I sort of thought, well, there's no leaf there yet. It's going to take quite a few weeks, and maybe, a few days, maybe weeks for them to emerge. So on Monday morning, it was the quickest I ever went to school. I was about 10 years old, and I rushed into the classroom to see this vase in full leaf. And I've got to say, I was really disappointed. Not that they were in full leaf, but that Miss Beasley, my teacher, was right. And from then on, I became interested in trees. I thought they were just incredible things to learn about. They had so many stories. And also that tree was an important part of my growing up life. We used to play conkers because we didn't have computers. So collecting horse chestnut, the fruits, the conkers, was a serious part of growing up. And you always wanted the champion. And actually that leads on, because I'll not say that we're competitive as tree people, but if you have a tree in your garden, you want to have the biggest and the best. So we are really competitive in the tree world, and that's what caught my attention very early on in my years, and set me on my path to growing trees and trees being a part of my career. I was very active in the Scouts, and I asked to do the Forester's Badge, which was probably my first qualification in trees. And they'd never done this before, and they said, well, Tony, we've never done the Forester's Badge before, so it's going to be very difficult. I said, well, there's always a time to start. And I did the Forester's Badge, and I think I was one of the first in Lancashire to do that. But more and more children are doing that Forester's Badge now, and hopefully that some of those that are doing those badges will come into the tree world and make it a part of their career. So why trees? Why are trees important is a question that I'm often asked, as well as why did you come into trees? But they are very important in our in our daily life. Often we take them for granted. Often we complain about them because they can be a nuisance when they drop their leaves or their flowers, or they're planted outside our house and we can't park the car. But actually we need to enjoy them more. We need to respect them more, because without trees, we wouldn't be alive today. They improve all our ecosystem services. So, for example, the air we breathe is produced by trees. They're taking in the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, and they use that in the process of photosynthesis and make food to put new leaves out and grow, and at the same time bank carbon. So the carbon that we're hearing about a lot now, about the need to sequester carbon and bank it, that's what trees do. And you know, the larger the tree, the bigger the tree, the more active it is and the more productive it is. On a very hot day, if you're in the sun and you walk under the canopy of a tree, then you will feel the temperature drop dramatically. They are incredible natural air conditioners, and they can reduce the temperature, the daily temperature, by about 10 degrees reduction, which is quite amazing. And it's not until you walk under these things or walk into a woodland or a park on a very hot summer's day that you realize the significance. And at the same time, they're absorbing dust, they're absorbing particulates that cars give off, and they're storing those and stopping them going into the atmosphere. And they have the ability to shed their bark. So trees like the London plane, that look like camouflage trees with the bark flaking off, that's a process where they hold the dust on the bark, and then when the bark becomes clogged and blocked up and they can't breathe through it, they can shed those plates of bark and start to breathe again. So they are incredible in terms of improving our air quality and temperature, and at the same time reducing runoff from water. So the more trees we have in our gardens, and particularly front gardens where we have lots of paved drives, etc., they slow that water runoff. They take that water up and they use it rather than it running off down the drains and in turn causing flooding down the rivers. So incredible things. And as I said at the beginning, they actually improve our mental well-being. We feel good when we're near trees. We relax and we become ourselves, and that's quite significant. And it's been proven that anybody that's feeling down or poorly or recovering from an operation or an illness, if they can look out of their window while they're in that recovery period and see trees in the green landscape, it will improve their recovery time and make them get better quicker. So that's just a few things. They give us products, they provide food in terms of fruit and nuts, they give us timber for house building, etc. So they are extremely valuable, and often we take them for granted. So to celebrate the Queen's Green Canopy and the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, we need to plant more trees. We heard at the beginning that our planting season stopped for a while because we need to plant trees at the right time. But that will start again in the autumn. And for me, autumn is the best planting time. I far sooner plant a tree in autumn than spring, mainly because the soil's still warm, root activity is good. And when we plant a tree, even though it's dropped all its leaves and it's gone into a dormant stage, the root activity is still there, and they'll start to root and become partly established before the dry springs that we're witnessing. So April that's just gone, we had a whole month without rain here in London, no frosts, and trees that we planted, in the spring will need to be looked after. They will need lots of water, lots of TLC and lots of aftercare. So if we can plant in autumn, and we've got plenty of time to plan now for that planting season, they will get off to a better start.
That's wonderful, Tony. Just to put into context, I'd love to hear from the audience, and you can put some Q&As in the chat. You know, we'd love to know where exactly in the UK you are, and also tell us about your garden sizes, or if you don't have a garden, please do let us know any specific questions you have about trees. But Tony, I just wanted to touch on a really important point that you highlighted about sort of mental well-being and how important it is that trees just calm us down. So many of us who have a really busy and daily life, we often neglect taking some fresh air and going out. And so I would encourage you to give us some advice on how we can improve our well-being with trees, whether it's planting it, or whether it's just sort of going out or coming to a garden like Kew or anywhere else. What are your sort of top tips from a mental well-being point of view?
Well, I think it's about getting close to nature, Smooth Tree, and the easiest way of doing that is going out into your garden if you've got trees in there, or to a local park, an open space, a botanic garden like Kew Gardens or Chelsea Physic Garden, and just, you know, walking round, maybe switch the telephone off, the mobile phone, or use it to photograph trees, and just to walk round and absorb that natural feeling under trees. Touch the tree, give it a cuddle. And the other day I was waiting for someone to do, we were doing a pitch for a tree planting scheme in Oxford. And I was early, I was about half an hour early. It was quite hot. And I went and sat under a beech tree that was outside the offices. And I just sat there. It's a lot cooler. And I had my back to the tree. And it was just so nice looking up through that canopy, seeing the leaves move, the number of birds that were in that tree that you wouldn't have necessarily seen or experienced had you not been under that tree and you'd been at distance. But also then looking down and looking at the vegetation around the base of the tree, I noticed some orchids coming up, and various other wildflowers, and then bee activity, etc., because of that natural habitat. And actually I felt good. You know, I was quite nervous before going in to do that pitch, but even though I prepared for it, but it just wound me down, and it just, you know, just got everything ticking away normally, and I loved it. And I think, you know, we're all under pressure today, you know, going into work, etc., and we're in a hurry. We get on the train or on a bus or in the car, and then straight into the office. And I think what would be nice is if you can plan a journey that you walk through, especially if you live in somewhere like London, you know, walk through Green Park to the office, walk through Regent's Park. We are blessed with these spaces, and I think we need to enjoy them more and get more out of them. I do talk to trees as well, you know, because I think
you mentioned that you've been talking to trees.
Yeah, and they and some people might think it's wacky, but it doesn't really matter. You know, if they don't talk back, they don't answer back. But actually, it might be something that you get off your chest, and the trees
they
listen.
do talk back. I find that they do talk back when they sort of have their leaves shimmer a bit. And I totally agree. You know, they will feed back to you in some way. They really do. I can definitely attest. I don't know if there are any parents or grandparents in the audience, or carers or guardians, but as soon as I take my sort of 15-month-old child in the pram just outside, you can immediately see a complete transformation when they're amongst nature, grass, trees. And I must admit, there were lots of Instagrammers many weeks ago, sort of about a month ago, taking pictures of the cherry blossoms and posting it on Instagram to say, well, spring is here. So it's a really interesting way that people really do connect with trees. Tony, I've got some amazing questions that I'd love to dip into, as well as
just before you do, though, you mentioned everybody photographing cherry trees. You know, in Japan, that's a ritual. And I went chasing cherries. We call it chasing cherries, following the blossom a few years ago, and it is incredible. And you go to these parks where there are hundreds, thousands of cherries, or maybe one really old one, you know, several, say 1,000 years old, And you can have as many as 300,000 people going to that one cherry tree over a 2-week period, and photographing it and having
and bowing down to it.
Watching.
It's a temple, isn't it?
It is, and that's something I'd love to see more of. More of us doing that over here as well.
Yes, I think we need to sort of let go of our shackles of talking to trees being an embarrassment and embracing it as a sort of as a way to connect with ourselves and with nature, because as you said, they are providing us the oxygen for our lungs, and so we should be so grateful and thankful.
Exactly.
So I'm going to just ask a question from the lovely Emily, who said she's really excited to be in this session, and she has a garden and she would love a perfect tree for it. It's a low maintenance garden that she has. And it's roughly 5 meters by 10 meters. I suppose, Emily, we might ask you a few more questions about whereabouts in the country you are, for Tony to give some advice. But as a starter for 10, Tony, if someone has a small garden, what are your top tips?
I would be looking at obviously a small tree, because it's, we have a slogan as well for the Queen's Green Canopy and for tree planting in general, is about planting the right tree in the right place for the right purpose. And so first of all, low maintenance comes to mind, that you don't want to be doing a lot of work and pruning that tree. So I'm going to go for something like a rowan. And
how do you spell that?
ROWAN, or mountain ash. And if you want to be true native, then we have a native species, the mountain ash. So you could plant that. But if you wanted to go more exotic and more ornamental, then there are many. And actually, if I had a look on the Waitrose plant website the other day, just to have a look, I was really impressed about what trees were on there, and there are several mountain ashes on there. There's a lovely one and I do have some images that I can show at the end, but there's a lovely one called Olympic Flame, or Dodong, and this is from South Korea. And the reason why I would choose a mountain ash is because they're very small, not very small, but they stay relatively small in a 5 by 10 meter garden. But you get bang for your buck. So you get good spring flower, followed by lots of berries, which are good for birds. The spring flower is good for pollinating insects. And then you get good autumn color. Most of them have terrific hues of reds, yellows, oranges. And then actually the framework and some have sticky buds. The framework is interesting as well. So you've got all year round interest, including the bark. And I think that's what's really important today, that you tick in a small garden, 5 by 10, tick as many boxes as possible. And if I didn't go for a mountain ash, I'd probably go in for a birch, a nice ornamental birch, either a native again, if you wanted to stay native, but if you wanted a nice ornamental one, the Himalayan birch with a lovely white bark, or the Erman's birch with a lovely orange bark.
So Tony, you mentioned a few sort of technical terms there, not too many, but when you mean native, what do you mean? And when you say non-native, what do you mean?
Yeah, so native means that it's native to the British Isles, that it was here when we left Europe, 8,000, just over 8,000 years ago. That was the first Brexit. And any tree that was on our island then is classed as a British native. There aren't many. We only have about 40 different species of trees compared to, other countries like China and other parts of Europe and North America, which are very rich and have, hundreds, thousands of tree species. So we're pretty poor in that term. But often people want to plant native trees for the biodiversity, to help our native biodiversity. But ornamental trees can be just as rewarding to biodiversity and give us just as much pleasure in terms of the ornamental attributes. Now, non-native are trees that we've brought into our gardens and landscapes, for their ornamental or other practicalities, whether it's for timber, shade, things like that. But they're introduced from other countries.
Now, I just want to ensure that Tony's expertise is really recognised by the audience, because we are so excited to have you, and you are Mr. Tree God, I would say. And for anyone who doesn't know, Tony was the head of the Arboretum at Kew Gardens for many, many years, and has won very special awards and honours by Her Majesty and various different sort of experts for his care and nature. So when you were at Kew, Tony, you were obviously looking at various different species from around the world. Can you tell us about any specific tree or a plant that you brought over from overseas that was quite remarkable and has left a legacy there?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I curated and managed the Arboretum, the best tree collection in the world of temperate trees. And I worked there. I was at Kew for 43 years, and I retired last July. And one of my jobs was to, just like a curator of a museum, is improving the collections. And we would go looking for trees overseas, and I concentrated on the Far East, so China, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, etc. And we know we're not looking for new species necessarily, but we're looking for species that will grow in our garden at Kew and increase the diversity of the collections. But also everything that we collected and planted is used in scientific research at Kew. So looking for chemical properties that can be used in medicines, etc. Looking at how we can combat pests and diseases, and looking for trees that will be resilient to climate change. So I had a wonderful career. I spent probably 25 years traveling around the world, and we collect seeds, and those seeds come back into quarantine where they're checked to make sure that there's no new pests and diseases on them before they're released in the nursery, so that ready for us to grow them. So I don't advocate anyone bringing things back in from holiday. That's one thing we definitely don't want people to do, because there's a risk of introducing exotic pests and diseases. But I think one tree that comes to mind, probably one of the, one that's really, I've got a painting on my wall in the front room of it because it's so special, is a sapphire dragon tree from Taiwan. And when we went there, they'd listed it. This is like a foxglove tree, a Paulownia, and very rare. There were about 150 individual trees in the wild, and we collected the seed, we brought it back. It shouldn't really have been hardy like that bead tree at Chelsea Physic Garden, but it's proved to be very hardy, very beautiful in flower, absolutely gorgeous in flower. And then we since found out that there were only 13 left in the wild. That's how fast it was disappearing.
Wow.
So 13
I've
individual.
looked it up online, Tony. It's such a beautiful, I wish I could paste a picture of it. It's such a beautiful tree. So is this the sapphire dragon tree, Paulownia Kawakami?
Yeah.
Kawakami. Yeah.
And that's one that I actually introduced into cultivation in the West, into our gardens. So there's quite a few trees like that. And when I'm walking around Kew, people say to me, "What's your favorite tree?" And I have to whisper, because I don't want all the other trees to feel left out. And actually, my favorite trees, they vary from season to season. Every time I go, I have a different favorite one, whether it's in flower. So when I was in Kew this week, actually walking around Kew, looking at some of my old friends and catching up with them, tree wise, I mean. Yes. And the tulip trees are in full flower now.
Which one?
The tulip trees.
Tulip trees?
Yeah. And they are absolutely stunning. They're my favorite tree this week. And they have, there are only two species, one from North America, one from China. And they have lovely tulip-like flowers, beautiful leaves, just such majestic trees, and big trees as well. So, yeah.
Perfect. I mean, if Tony has a lovely Instagram feed, and I believe you're on at Tony KIRKHAM, is that right?
Yes, yeah. At
Tony KIRKHAM. So if anyone's on Facebook or Instagram, please do show some love to Tony and his incredible pictures of various different bits of trees, which I always find really interesting. So a few more questions from the audience. We've got a really active question base.
Excellent.
So I'm really excited for this. So Eleanor, I think you're in the Midlands, if I'm not incorrect. So Eleanor has a south-facing garden. It's been badly neglected for several years, and she's keen to plant as many suitable trees as possible and have a natural habitat underneath it. So, I mean, I suppose this could apply to many people who have maybe slightly bigger gardens, but are south-facing. How do you sort of tackle that?
Well, there is a Japanese approach where trees are planted at very close spacings to form a dense mass. But you'd have to be in there with secateurs, and you'd have to choose the right species that aren't going to dominate and take over. But what I would suggest is there are lots of websites with trees on. Go on the Waitrose website and have a look, because there's some really good choice of tree species on there, and it gives heights and sizes. And go for the smaller ones, the Japanese maples, the birches, the rowans, those early ones. But try and put some of the unusual ones in, and look at the flowering seasons and autumn color seasons, and try and spread that load across the seasons, so that you've always got something, especially if you can plant, say 10 trees, then choose some for flowers, some for fruit, some for autumn color, some for bark. So you've always got something to look at in the garden.
And I think that's a lovely way of looking at a garden and planting. It's not just planting any tree. It's about, as you said, the right tree in the right place, but also what will it do for you and your family or your local community? Do you want to see beautiful trees with flowers or berries? We've had a couple of questions around people not being gardeners and feeling a little bit nervous around planting trees themselves. There's a question around someone wanting to plant a tree for the Jubilee this week, but I think your recommendation is to wait perhaps for the planting season in October. That's the lovely someone who wanted to plant a tree in their church. I think that's Hillary in the West Coast.
I mean, if Hillary wants to do that, then it would have to be a tree that's been grown in a container with a good root ball, but you would have to commit to doing the aftercare. So if you plant a tree now, you've got to be watering, and you're going to be watering weekly, probably through the summer, to ensure that tree gets through. And often it's just better waiting until that planting season, when you know that the tree's ready for planting and ready to get its roots down.
Yeah, so Hillary, if you can wait perhaps a few more months, but choose your tree and perhaps support the Queen's Green Canopy initiative, which is really trying to work hard on embedding forestry skills and planting more trees, but in the autumn season, then please do. And we've obviously got our lovely collection out in Waitrose stores at the moment and John Lewis. We have a few people from the Midlands and Cambridge and suggestions and ideas on which gardens are lovely to visit, because we've talked a lot about London-based spaces. Are there any lovely places in the Midlands?
Yeah,
Cambridge is not in the Midlands. Sorry, I know Dave from Cambridge will probably think, gosh, this Londoner doesn't know her Midlands from Cambridge.
Do you know what? We are one of the blessed nations, if you like, because we have so many gardens all across the British Isles. If the RHS have several gardens, so you've got the main garden at Wisley in Surrey, and then Hyde Hall in Essex, Rosemoor in Devon, the new garden Bridgewater in Salford, and I've missed Harlow Carr in Yorkshire. So they're great gardens to visit. But actually, if you go into some of the RHS website, onto the RHS website, they have lots of gardens that they share. So if you're a member of the RHS, and you can go into, a whole lot of gardens that you can go into and visit. But yeah, I would say that every part of the country there are gardens. So in Cambridge, we've got Cambridge Botanic Gardens, which is fantastic and has a fantastic winter garden as well. So a lot of these gardens are seasonal. If you go to Cornwall, then in Cornwall in spring just comes alive from March through to May, with magnolias, camellias, and a whole array of rare plants. And literally you can't walk 100 yards without coming across another garden. So the Yellow Garden scheme, the Yellow Garden Book scheme, which is a scheme run to where people open their own private gardens for charity. And there must, I'm not sure how many there are, but there must be hundreds, possibly thousands across the country in almost every town. And a lot of them group together. So if they're in say, for example, in Kew, around Kew Green, then they will all open on the same day. So you can go from one to the other. So the Yellow Garden scheme is well.
Like an open house.
Yeah.
It's almost like the open house.
That's right. Yeah.
Open house project. How's everyone finding it? I just want to check in with everyone. If there's a thumbs up, or if there's anything that we can do to improve or entertain you better, then please let us know. This is dynamic, and not just us having a friendly chat to each other or to you. So please let us know. But we have had a few questions around people with different soils, and chalk based, or not quite sure how to know which is the best tree for the best sort of soil. So would you have to consult anyone for this?
Well, again, Smootree, there's so much information out there, so many books and online services that will always tell you what sort of soil is best for a tree. So if you say, for example, you've identified a tree that you really like, if you go on the internet and go on the RHS website, that is very, very clear at saying whether it mines acid soil, alkaline soil, where it mines chalk, shallow, sand, what aspect, whether it needs direct sun or reduced shade. So, don't be shy using those resources. There is a lot of information out there. So rather than actually consulting, unless you've got a friend that's in the arboricultural world or the tree world, use those online services.
Well, you're on my hotline, Tony, so I'll be coming to you. So the lovely Kevin has talked about the sort of flint and chalk soil that he has, and he wants to plant an all year round unusual tree, which is already mature, so he can enjoy rather than so he can enjoy it now rather than those sort of future generations of his family to enjoy. He wants to enjoy it now. Is that right, Kevin? I hope so.
That's good. So he wants a tree that will grow on there. Well, I'll tell you what, if you wanted flower, then the yellow magnolias, the yellow flowering magnolias like chalk, they don't mind. So that's an interesting one to plant. I found that trees. The other thing to do actually is have a look round and see what's growing well where you live, because that's always a good indicator as well. And if they grow well, then that's the type of tree to choose. But a lot of people get scared of planting on chalk because they think they're on their own, and it's not easy. But there are trees that will tolerate chalk. Things like liquid amber, so the sweet gum.
Sorry, what is liquid amber?
Liquid amber sweet gum is a very ornamental tree with lovely autumn color. That's what we will grow sweet gum for autumn color. But yeah, have a look on websites. Put in chalk, and those species will come up. But don't be afraid of trying something different, because it's always worth having a go, and they may do well.
How long does it take? So we've got a lovely question from Jean, and I'm just going to introduce it in with a question from myself. Some trees that you see are absolutely enormous and probably been there for hundreds of years. But actually, I heard that some trees can go really quickly to a very tall height within 30 years. Yeah. So what are the sort of fast-growing native trees that we can plant and actually reap the benefits from a climate change point of view right now?
Yeah. Well, as you're right to say, a lot of species will grow fast, because what you've got to remember is where trees come from. And this is a question I always pose to people. And they don't just come from a nursery for the Waitrose plant website or the shop, but in nature, they occur in woodlands and forests. Mm-hmm. And in a woodland or forest, they have to get up there quick. You know, that's the rule. They have to get up there for the light, and they're in competition with all their friends around them. So many trees have that ability to grow fast, reach the sky, and then slow down. So trees like hornbeam, native mm-hmm. tree that will grow quickly. Field maple, another native tree that will grow quickly and then slow down once it reach that top. And then there are trees like alders, birch, silver birch. It will really race off in the early years, get to about 10 meters, and then slow down. Once they reach their ultimate height, they'll slow down. So unless it's a sub-canopy tree, then they will be racing to get up there.
And what are the sort of I was going to say strata, but that probably is completely the wrong term.
No,
but
it is a strata.
Canopy,
yeah.
Is it a strata? Oh,
yeah, it is. They're what we call stratal layers in a woodland community. So you've got those trees that will just hide in there, mm-hmm. waiting for the right moment. So we mm-hmm. start with the pioneer species. So the trees that the first to reclaim and regain land. So the birches, the alders, the willows, the poplars. Those are the ones that we call pioneer species, because they're the first to reclaim land. You know, they can distribute the seed. They're very, very successful at producing viable seed. And if there's been, say, for example, a forest fire or, on the edge of moorland where trees are starting to move in, then those are the first ones. And they really set the scene. They establish a small heathland, scrubland, woodland that's then prepared for the bigger trees to come in, like the oaks, the hornbeams, and various other trees. So that's how we go. And some trees can, like the hawthorn, a lot of the large trees like or large shrubby trees like the viburnums and dogwoods, they form that sub-canopy layer, which are really important for pollinating insects.
Right.
And supporting biodiversity in a woodland.
Now we've there's quite a few more questions, but I want to tackle them in sort of themes, if that's okay. So the lovely a lovely person from Cambridgeshire is quite concerned about winds, and what we had the great storm, well, not the great storm, but a big storm just a few weeks ago, in which actually some beautiful trees felled. What's your opinion of planting trees which are in windy areas, and when they do fall, do you get upset, or is that just a natural course of life and that's it? Yeah, I mean,
you do become attached to trees in the sense that they become your friends. And I remember the great storm in 1987 where we lost over 700 trees at Kew. And actually in the southeast of England, we lost 15 million trees in one night, which was a huge wake-up call.
15 million?
15 million, yeah. And before that, we've been talking about Dutch elm disease and how we lost 20 million over 10 years. So it was a real wake-up call. And everyone in the tree world was quite depressed about it. But when we look back, we learned so much from that storm. We learned how shallow tree roots were. We learned new planting techniques. And before we finish, I must give my my top tips on planting and aftercare, because that's what we're about today. But I always look at it as an opportunity to replant and change, you know, new things. And because if we look at it sadly all the time, then, you know, we'll never move forward. But so I've got something here. I've got a wine glass. I knew I'd need it. I'm not been drinking while I'm talking, but I use this to demonstrate trees and what we learn from storms. And the goblet is the crown of the tree, and this is empty, so it's deciduous at present. And then the stem is the trunk, and then the base, this base here that stops the glass falling over, is the root plate. And in perspective, that's how shallow tree roots are. So even large oak trees, the roots are no more deeper than a metre. And we may have a 30-metre tree above that 1 metre root plate, but they stand up, and it's all about spread. So this base comes out to the edge of the canopy. We call that the drip line. This is the wettest part of the tree, so that's where a lot of the roots are active. And it's about spread, even spread of the roots around the base, so the tree can bend with the wind. And it's about friction, so the roots grip the soil, and that's what holds them together. So one of the key things when we're tree planting is preparing that tree for the future. And what you've got to remember is that trees are like people. The trees are just like us. They need training, so they go through school. They need training. They go through school, and they need to be prepared. They can be moody, they can be stressy, and we have to keep them de-stressed and help them get through life. So by planting correctly, we're preparing them for the future. We prepare them for strong winds, and so we mustn't overstake. If we overstake, then they're not getting that practice in where the actual tree's stem flexes. And by being able to move when they're planted, signals are being sent down to the roots saying we need more roots on that side, or we need more roots on that side, and we're preparing them for storms like we've just had. So it's about teaching them early and preparing them for the future, and that might be for 500 years.
And when I almost think this is a first for my JL event, but I feel that this is a very philosophical discussion that we've had about trees and almost the purpose of life and caring for ourselves. But a lot of our audience are asking about planting the tree, and you've shared your tips. But in terms of the aftercare and the nurturing, is it quite hands-off depending on the tree?
When you say hands-off?
Well, I mean, in terms of, for example, with plants, there's plant feed. What do trees need?
Okay, well, let's run through the basic principles of tree planting. Yes. Because I think often we make it more technical than it is, and it is very, very straightforward. And the simpler we make it, the better for the tree. So first of all, when we dig a hole for a tree, it should be square, not round, and it should be shallow. Now, you know, I said that tree roots never go down below a metre. That's the sort of depth that they go down to. So let's only dig a hole the depth of the root ball. So if you buy a tree in a pot, then dig the hole the depth of the pot, which is generally about the spit of a spade. So the blade of the spade, about the depth of that.
So let's start again. So we've got a square. And
I'm just going to share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Shallow hole, spit of the spade. So you can see in the background the spit of the spade there. That's the depth of the hole, and we dig it square. because the weakest part of a hole is the corner. And if we dig a round hole, then there's no corners for the tree roots to break out. So what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible for that tree to get out of that tree pit. When we plant the tree in the middle of the hole, we've got to plant it at the right depth. And many trees are planted too deep. And when I say too deep, an inch too deep, deeper than the root collar or the top of the container, will kill a tree, but it will take, you know, maybe 15 years to do that. So it's a long, slow process. So ensure that the root collar at the top of the container is level with the surrounding ground and no deeper. And then when you put the soil back, the soil that comes out of the hole should go back. There's no need to be putting compost and organic matter in there, because all that does is upset the soil type. And it can create problems because it slumps or it gets too sticky, holds too much water. So the soil that comes out must go back. And then when you've finished, the tree's planted, you can mulch the surface with organic matter. This is compost from the compost heap. And that will harness any water that's in the soil, so stop it evaporating, and it will stop any weeds growing that could be competition for the tree. And then even in winter and certainly in spring when we plant trees, then we will need to water probably for the first 2 years. And depending on the size of the tree and the type of soil, or what our weather's doing, but we are getting lots of long dry periods now, we will need to water. This is what we call a tree gator bag. So it's a bag that goes around the tree and we fill it up with water, and that water slowly percolates out of the bottom. It holds 20 gallons and it takes about 10 hours to seep out. So we know that all that water is going where we want it. And then finally, you know, I mentioned about staking, that we can overstake trees. If we have to use a stake, then use a proper stake and a short stake with a proper tree tie. You know, don't be using a lady's tights or string or wire. Buy a tree tie. It is a good investment, and we should be prepared to buy proprietary sundries to help with tree planting. And at the end of the year, that tree stake should be able to come off. And if we have to keep that tree stake on for, 3, 4, 5 years, then there's something not quite right with the tree planting process that we.
How do you know? But how do you know if it's? Is it just based on stability?
Yeah, when you undo the tie, and all the ties have a buckle, so they can be easily untied. And if the tree's standing there on its own and you can flex the tree, just flick it around, and if it comes back to the central position, then it's ready for that tree stake to come off. And often, Samutri, I'll just use a bamboo cane, which again trees need to flex. So from an early age, that tree needs to sway in the wind, and that swaying in the wind is preparing it for those stronger winds later in life.
It's exercising.
And often we overstake and stop it doing that. It would be like me giving you a pair of crutches for a year and saying you can't walk anywhere without those crutches. And then at the end of the year, I take the crutches away and then you fall over because you've no muscle in your legs. Yes. And it's exactly the same with trees. Trees are exactly like people. And just whenever you're working with trees or dealing with trees, just think about, if you were a tree, what would they need? And that's how vets work. The tree can't say to us, I need this, just like a dog can't say to the vet, I've got a sore paw. We have to work it out, and we can often do that just by putting ourselves in the tree's situation.
But is in the instance of pleaching trees and sort of getting them in a line, is the stake in the ground for a lot longer, or?
No, again, the same principles, that once they're planted and providing they've been grown on a good nursery, and I'm sure that most pleached trees will have been, they'll have been prepared. So they're ready to move, and they'll establish at exactly the same time as a normal standard tree.
And if we've had a couple of questions in the audience about moving trees.
Yes.
You know, how does someone go about that?
Well, if the tree's been in the ground for several years, then it will need preparing. And
Okay.
And what we do, we dig round the tree, so we're severing off the roots that we don't want, and then we put the soil back, and then we leave it to grow for a season, for a year. And that will encourage the tree to produce a lot more root within the root system that we've cut back to. And that's how we do it on a nursery when we're preparing trees to be moved from the nursery to gardens. So it's best to give it that preparation before you move it. And you can do it actually, if it's a small tree, say like the one down in the bottom right-hand corner here, you can just go around with a spade, push the spade in, the full spit, all the way around, and leave it, and then come back the following year. Mark where you've spaded round to, and then lift it with a root ball, and it should move okay.
Tony, this has been an absolutely fascinating session for myself, and I hope for our audience. I just want to highlight a couple of things before we say an official thank you so much. And so firstly, I would encourage everyone, if they are on social media, to follow Tony at Tony KIRKHAM. And we'll be, I hope, Tony, that we can share some of your slides on our website as well, bagsofethics.org. And I hope that we can perhaps take this session to a few more audiences and share these incredible top tips, because it really is an eye-opener. And I think that you've made it sound so simple. I know it's not this simple to plant a tree, but you've made it really much more approachable, and I hope our audience appreciates it. So please do follow Tony. And if there are any specific questions that we haven't answered, I know we haven't been able to answer lots of very, very specific questions on here about silver birches and Japanese acers and gardens, which are 20 by 40 or whatever, then please do feel free to email us, info@bagsofethics.org. We'll pass the message on to Tony, and we'll have a sort of Q&A. And if there's more further interest, then we'd absolutely be delighted to host something separately. But I know that the MyJL team are incredible and may host, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but perhaps an in-person event, because this was, I think, almost like a gardener's question time, but better because it had Tony. We would love to have your support for the Queen's Green Canopy collection. This is a really important initiative, and the collection that you see behind me with the tins and the bags and the knee cushions and the tool belts, they've been designed with true consideration for nature, and proceeds from the collection will be going to the Queen's Green Canopy mission. And it's every little bit counts. We really want your support, and please do recommend it to your friends. Tony, did you enjoy the session?
I loved it. I love talking about trees, and I love talking about trees to people who love hearing about trees. So thank you very much for asking me. I hope we can do it again. Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Yes, so we have a minute left if anyone has anything else burning to say, but I just want to say thank you very much to our audience for having such active participation. We really didn't know if this would be interesting, but I've been blown away by Tony's talk and yourself. So thank you very much. Bagsofethics.org, if you have any questions. John Lewis and Waitrose will be selling the products, and please do follow Tony at Tony KIRKHAM. Thank you very much. Have a lovely, lovely afternoon.